Aloha and ikomo mai. Welcome to the Democratic Lieutenant Governor primary debate hosted by Common Cause Hawaii. My name is Cameron Hurt, State Director of Common Cause. Here with me keeping time, our intern Edgar Reyes. We want to welcome you all to this debate. We want to open this debate by letting everybody know that we invited all candidates to be here. Candidate Pulatasi, while he did accept our request, let us know that he had a scheduling conflict the day of and would not be able to join us. Kauai Mayor Derek Kawakami never replied to our request to the invite. We would like to thank our candidates for being here today, and we are going to get right to them after we give you guys why we're here. Today we're going to have a rigorous debate over the position of Lieutenant Governor for the Democratic Party. Each candidate will be given a 1 minute initial, will be given a question. They'll have 1 minute to reply to that question. After their 1 minute reply, each candidate will be given a 30-second rebuttal. After the rebuttal, candidates will be given another 30-second follow-up to give for their final answer. The moderator will also offer a follow-up question, which could lead to a 2-minute discussion in that time. We are going to get started. First and foremost, we're going to introduce our candidates here. Starting out, we have Representative Della Bellotti here with us tonight. Thank you for joining us, Representative. We have Mr. John Choi joining us tonight. Thank you so much. And we have Ku Kadora joining us tonight. Thank you for being here, sir. Ku Quadra. Thank you. Make sure we get the names right now. So we are going to go ahead and get this going tonight and get started. Going to open up with our first question of the night. We're going to section this round really around questions that came up and wondering what you guys are going to do as it relates to energy costs. Our first question of the night being, Hawaii residents continue to face high electricity costs driven by a combination of factors, including changes in the state's energy portfolio, utility investments, and global energy market volatility, which we can see with the war in Iran. As Lieutenant Governor, how would you work with the governor, the legislature, and other stakeholders to reduce energy costs for consumers while ensuring a reliable and sustainable energy system for all of Hawaii? We'll start with you, Representative, if that's okay.
Thank you, Cameron. On the issue of energy, we really need to push aggressively on the 2045 renewable energy goals. That will help us, I think, overall bring down electricity costs and really in the long term. In terms of short term energy costs, gas costs, those types of things, we are at the mercy of a global situation. And so we are going to have to, I think, monitor and watch what's happening. And with gas costs and tariffs and all of those things, I think that's something that we are going to have to just kind of work through. But returning to the issues of energy and the broader goals of energy independence, again, we have to keep pushing through on those issues. I'd be interested to have a conversation with the governor about the proposal for LNG, because that is a kind of investment that could actually drive prices up as we move forward. And so I think there's going to have to be robust conversation about what our renewable energy portfolio is going to look like as we move forward as a state.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you. Energy is really important for Hawaii. Our greatest resource is the sun. We need to go to solar completely. That means on every available rooftop, we should have solar panels. It's a tremendous waste right now. Half of the residential homes don't have solar power. HECO needs to incentivize it. We need to hold hands with HECO as a government body to make sure that's completed. We had a great start, but it's not finished. We need to build on solar farms. Solar is the future. It always has been. It's common sense. Going to anything else that deals with petroleum is going backwards. And we can't afford to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Kitara.
There's many different avenues I think we should go. The first is mandate a law where it's required to have developers put in solar engineering within the plants. Also indoor farming, especially between high rises. That looks really, really appealing to look into it. Plus other additional types of resources, such as burning through fire and heat. That's also really good stuff. And mostly to work with the military on signed to the contracts for tax breaks.
Oh, yeah. Let me ask you a follow-up in that one. With a plan like that, that sounds like you're going to have to work really in conjunction with the governor, because the lieutenant governor does work very closely with the governor. What plans do you see from the current administration that make you feel like they're ready to move that way? Or what ways do you think that you can encourage the current administration to move that way if they're not there yet?
Well, icon as I am, the only thing that I would imagine is if they would have any type of worry or hesitation of working with someone new. Besides that, and not worrying about babysitting someone, I think a good relationship would be fun and all positive from there. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Choi, following up with you, you said in your initial response that, you know, lawmakers and the community really have to get with HECO to work with them as well as HECO working with the people as well. Does it concern you at all that HECO appears to have a monopoly on energy in the state? And if they do, by your assessment, then how do you work with that exactly?
Well, monopolies in and of themselves aren't a terrible thing if they're used for the good of the public. And that's why we have public utilities. Water is a monopoly. Sewers is a monopoly. And electricity is a monopoly because it's for the benefit of the people. Now, if HECO had the right policies in place, and we work with them to further incentivize solar, and the people who got on early, they had a pure solar system where for every kilowatt that they generated beyond their own use, they would get money back. I came in late in the game, and we still have to pay. It started out about $100 after we got the solar. We were so happy, but we're back up to like $300 a month, and it doesn't make sense. And we need to instill more solar. We need to have solar farms, and it could lead to an energy surplus. Thank you.
Thank you. Rep. Bellotti, is there we heard in your initial reply a very spirited answer, if you will. Is there a policy that you think, would possibly help Kama Aina see an alleviation on their HECO bills or on their fuel bills? Is there anything that can be done in the next 4 years that can be tangibly felt or seen policy-wise?
We have to continue to push on the 2045 renewable plan. HECO came out with a report about a year ago talking about how they were going to be moving towards the 2045 goal. We need to make sure that they're holding to their plans. It includes community-based solar plants. We need to make sure that they're moving forward. We need to make sure that the Public Utilities Commission is going to be involved if there's going to be any change in the mixture of fuels. And what I would say is that simply because liquefied natural gas has been in the conversation a lot, I think that is a new fuel source that had not been contemplated by HECO even a year ago. So I think we are in a place and in a time right now where there is probably transition. Some community-based solar projects might have stalled out. I would like to follow up on those and see what's the problems, what's the challenges there, and is there any way that we can help to continue to push the solar option forward. But we also have to be looking at what the other parts of the mixture are, right? Wind, geothermal. As I've talked with individuals across the state, there are still concerns with many of these other projects. So whatever we're doing on all islands, right? This is a statewide issue.
Right.
We need to make sure that it fits the communities.
Thank you so much for that. moving on, still keeping on economy, jobs, how we're doing as a state, Hawaii's economy has long depended heavily on tourism, leaving the state vulnerable to economic disruptions like we saw during COVID, for example. Do you believe Hawaii is overly reliant on tourism? If so, what industries or initiatives would you prioritize as Lieutenant Governor to diversify the state's economy and create high quality, long-term employment opportunities for residents of this state? And we will start with Mr. Choi.
Thank you. We really need to diversify our economy. One huge area that we need to grow, not only for the economy, but for our ability to sustain as a state that stands alone in the middle of the Pacific, is agriculture. It can create jobs. Right now we're exporting coffee and macadamia nuts, pineapples, and we need to be able to use that exclusivity, because we know the water in Hawaii is the purest, the air in Hawaii is the purest. We need to have agriculture move towards, and we can do this in one generation, where we can feed our families with the food that is grown in Hawaii, and with a surplus, we can export that at a premium across markets, not only in the United States, but across the world, because Hawaii has such a strong brand. And the jobs that will create will be beneficial for everyone and help with the food shortage and food insecurity when there are global issues that affect those.
Thank you. Skidar, we'll go to you.
I'm sorry, you repeat there.
The question is, do you believe that Hawaii is overly reliant on tourism? And if so, how would you work as Lieutenant Governor to diversify that economic portfolio so that it benefits all of the state?
Well, as for tourism, it's embedded in our culture. We're pretty much tourists ourselves. We go out, and a lot of Hawaii residents frequently travel, I know. High tax base for the movie industry, I see doing our economy really well. Other things that could generate it would be, of course, construction. And the way that is to modify all our surroundings, so the initial contract will run smoother. A lot of roads should be updated. Besides fixing potholes, just the design of the feng shui of overall movement. If you look at certain areas, if it's possible to rebuild in rural areas or high frequently passed bases. So, besides that, there's other things too that I think we should move forward to, like sports gambling is one of them. Recreational marijuana is another. I don't know how the tax stamp is nowadays, but I believe that would bring in a good income for our state in a good way. The times are changing, the people are changing with it, and being fostered with our original background on the negative stance, I believe we can move forward in the future in a good way.
Yeah.
For our economy, I agree with Mr. Choi that agriculture can be a really critical, important part of our diversified economy. And so I would support that. And the legislature has taken some wonderful steps in ensuring that there's more subsidies, transportation subsidies for neighbor islands so that we can get food crops to market. I think we need to continue to create incentives from farm to school, farm to hospital, farm to state institutions, and then that's going to be a way that we can also help to develop the demand for the products that we're building. I also really appreciate the work of my colleagues who have advanced making sure that the brand of Hawaii, whether it's macadamia, tea, cacao, that these are products that we are also supporting and helping to brand and market and export. But we also should be looking at things like the film arenas. We're investing we're reinvesting tax credits in that, and so we should push on that. The clean energy sector that we talked about, making sure that we continue again to invest in making sure we get solar out there on rooftops, it creates clean energy jobs. Finally, I want to pivot to this question about jobs. So we need to invest in our education systems, because it's through our community colleges, our early college programs, and even in our early child care arena, that if we're working to invest in teachers, into schools, we're working to place our keiki into good positions for good jobs. And by this I mean things like when we develop partnerships with the healthcare sector, and our public school students are in academies and they're moving through apprenticeship programs. When we invest in those kinds of partnerships, when we invest in workforce development in the community colleges, that's the building ground. That's the place where we can ensure that our keiki, our students, are getting the skills they need for those quality, high-paying jobs.
Thank you. I guess in following up with the diversification of the economy, coming back to something that you had said, Mr. Kidora, is if we allowed sports gambling or marijuana, recreational marijuana, that could help diversify our economy. Do you not worry about a criminality aspect of those? Is that something that should be passed in relation with possible criminal reforms too?
Well, each case study is different, but when you look at the overall subject matter of crime and marijuana by itself, I haven't seen the statistics, but I've witnessed from personal experience that those that have been diagnosed with schizophrenia, for example, as a negative sense, it was other things that activated it except for the marijuana. It was just hand in hand with something, but like a catch-22, if that makes any sense. As for subject matter that I wanted to bring up was international trade agreements at the state level, and I know schooling is very important. I love school very much, but I believe trade needs to be focused on, because with the booming stance of everyone getting an education, the trade of work is scarce.
Okay. So you would say adding trade in there too as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Like, for example, I joke around with my kids. I go, would you like to go to college? They're like, yes. I go, well, you better be good at sports, because if you're not good at sports, you're not going. If you be realistically and notice how huge the financial depth is after getting an education, yes, it's priceless. Becoming a better person for the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Following up with you, Mr. Choi, when you talk about switching to agriculture, is there a pause for concern of diversifying from tourism to agriculture in a time of extreme climate change?
That's a great question. And climate change has to be taken into consideration, but it shouldn't stop us from moving forward. And in addition to agriculture, I'd like to add that high tech is an area that we can, if we were able to implement the solar and have a surplus, what would stop us from having a data center here in Hawaii? Data centers are going up all over the mainland in foreign countries, and we should have one here in Hawaii. And with that surplus from the solar, we could go right into high tech and offer very reasonable or free electricity, because electricity is the most expensive thing for a data center, because they have to keep those computers cool, and the energy is used all for cooling. So high tech is another area, and I agree with Della, film, definitely. But there are things we can manufacture here in Hawaii too, and I believe that manufacturing shouldn't be something that's overlooked. And going back to the agriculture, we've made pineapple, macadamia nuts, and Kona coffee like just household names on the mainland. Everyone thinks of Hawaii. Why couldn't we do that with other fruits like guava and lilikoi, which are less known? And going back to the fish ponds, and can we get a surplus so we can export fish grown in ancient Hawaiian ponds at a premium? I think we can.
Okay. Really quick, just on the rebuttal side, Representative Bellotti, do you agree that we should have more data centers and that we should be turning towards tech?
I have reservations about data centers. I think we need to really look at what those energy draws are going to be and what the effects of data centers have on communities. I think we are getting reports from the mainland, the continent, that it's very disruptive to communities. So I would actually want to really understand more what that proposal's about.
Okay. Hold on, let me get your opinion on data centers too as well.
You asked if I'm in favor for an increase in data centers?
Do you think that would help diversify our economy and be good for the state overall?
Well, anything different adds to diversity, especially within statistics. Do I think it will actually show a magnitude of impact that we would expect? No. We would hope for? Maybe. But the data centers I do agree with, because all information is always good information.
Okay, thank you. Representative Bellotti, I just want to ask you one more question before we leave this topic. You ended your opening to the question with talking about how we need to, of course, invest in agriculture, film, all these are great, but we have to invest in education. Simply put, where's this money going to come from to invest in education? How are we going to change the spending priorities of our state to invest more in education, if that is the case?
I think we have to have an examination of our tax policies. And the budget and our tax policies really express our values as a community. 4 years ago, when we were not, when the state legislature in their wisdom was going to cut the budget for education and higher education, I was one of 3 representatives who voted no, which was very unusual. And so I think we have to do more to invest in education, early education, pre-K through 12 and higher. Now, are there going to be places where we can make sure that resources are getting to the places that they need to be, that there's no fraud, waste, or abuse? Yes, for sure we have to do that. But in general, I think we do need to really invest in these areas. And the way we're going to have to do that is having serious conversations about what our priorities are, and then also fund them. And so that means having a conversation about revenues and how do we generate revenues. I think this year the legislature has begun a conversation when we look at things like mansion taxes. We did a higher tax at the millionaire level, but really the top level. I think we're going to have to relook at what we did, but ensure that we're preserving the tax relief for working families. I also think that we have to look at for tax relief for working families to address some of the basic necessities.
Okay.
So we can have you know what, we have a lot of time. I want to really get into this.
We'll get back to that for sure.
Because there's a lot of things that we need to do around our tax policies.
Awesome. We're going to move on to our next question. And this question is really, and we'll start over here on my right first, but this question is really targeted around Native Hawaiian economic development. Native Hawaiians continue to experience disproportionately high rates of poverty, housing insecurity, and economic challenges. As Lieutenant Governor, what policies and partnerships would you champion to promote economic opportunity, workforce development, home ownership, and entrepreneurship within the Native Hawaiian community? How would these initiatives contribute to the long-term economic strength and resilience of Hawaii as a whole?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is bring up all subject matter and definitions regarding civet. And the heartbeat of the community. As for Native Hawaiians and housing, of course that's an issue, and it does more damage when the topic is brought up than perceived. But I think the best thing to do is just old style and to bring back the front yard, when everyone used to talk story, hang out in the front yard before going into the backyard, and isolating everyone. Once better relations in the community are better, then I believe everything else will follow.
Awesome. Thank you so much. To Representative Bellotti.
Can you repeat the question again?
Right,
Because you had workforce development, housing, and
workforce development, homeownership, entrepreneurship, basically economic advancement of Kanaka Maoli communities.
So I think on the issue of home ownership and housing, I think we really need to make sure that we're funding things like the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and making sure that they're empowered to deliver on the promises of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, even as the federal government is attacking DHHL. So I think we need to do a little bit of defense, as well as making sure that we invest in programs like DHHL. On the issue of workforce development and entrepreneurship, I think when we invest in programs that help overall workforce development, that invest overall in education, right? We are investing not just in Native Hawaiians, but we're investing in all of our people. And I think we need to push forward on those things. Now, with respect to education specifically for Native Hawaiians, to the extent that the Hawaii state government can stand in solidarity against attacks against Native Hawaiian programs, we should definitely continue to do that. And so at the university level, as we see programs that are maybe being diminished because of federal cuts, we need to look into how we can support that. Especially cuts from federal cuts to Native Hawaiian education programs. We're going to have to figure out ways to backfill all of these federal cuts. So I think it's important that it is about Native Hawaiians, and I want to focus on that, but really the tax coming from the federal government are on all kinds of programs. And so we're going to have to figure out a way how we fill in those gaps for all of our working families. And I think by nature of just helping Native Hawaiian programs, we're also helping all of Hawaii's people.
Mr. Choi.
Thank you. I think what she said, but the exact opposite in our last sentence. When we help all people, the Native Hawaiian population will also be helped. Right now, the disparity is against the working class is just massive. And the programs that we put in place should affect everyone equally. But to specifically start with the Hawaiian community, one thing we can and should do as soon as possible is free college for all Native Hawaiians. Now, we would so how do you determine that? Is it by blood quantum, by lineage? But that program should grow into free college for all children of Hawaii. And how would we pay for this? Well, right now there's corporations that profit immensely off our most valuable resource. The brand of Hawaii is paradise on earth. And we have corporations from travel, hotel, every industry that comes in and profits off of it. And we need to be able to use that natural resource. I'll give you an example of kind of how Alaska has their greatest resource is oil. And they give a stipend to each of their residents. We need to look at being able to provide stipends and free education for all our keiki. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to let you guys jump in. Did you guys have a rebuttal to any of your opponent's comments? Otherwise, I'll ask. No? Okay. Felt like this was a very friendly crew. Mr. Choi, let's start with you. With respect, you say that if we take care of all people, we'll take care of Native Hawaiians. However, Native Hawaiians statistically do worse in every category for working class people. So there are programs that do help working class people, but Native Hawaiians are still not feeling the benefit. What is the harm, or what would be the issue in centering a policy that does ensure Native Hawaiian advancement as well as all Kama'aina by their way of?
One thing we can do is stop putting Native Hawaiians in jail. So it's disrupting their family unit. And another thing that is disproportionate is the number of Native Hawaiians in prison, the number of Native Hawaiian families that are involved in the Child Protective Services. And I saw this when I was a Deputy Attorney General, and it's disproportionate. And when you break up the family unit, when there is no father in the home, it destroys the chances of those children from becoming productive members of society. The statistics are overwhelming. And when you destroy the family unit, then you're starting off so far behind the 8 ball.
How do you repair that, though, within the Native Hawaiian community? Because we know there are things like Big Brothers Big Sister, certain family subsidies for anybody who's going through a broken family system. However, again, Native Hawaiians are still bearing the brunt. Is there anything that can, in your mind, be done policy-wise that will not only help this community, but all of us as Kama'aina of this state?
Right, and we need to stop exporting our prisoners to Arizona. I mean, we got to look at our jail system. Like, if it's not a violent crime, you shouldn't be in jail. If you're a drug addict, you shouldn't be in jail. You should be in treatment. You know, we are spending so much money on housing people, so much of our resources who are non-violent offenders. And once you have the policy of stop putting Hawaiians in jail, stop disrupting their families. I was involved in a case years ago where the mother was accused of using drugs, and so the grandmother got the child. I mean, this case kept me up at nights. I couldn't sleep. It was so disturbing. So the CPS worker and the mom was in a little power struggle fight. And so one day she visited the grandmother, and she found out that the grandmother was letting the mom visit, but it was supervised. And they took that baby from the grandmother and they gave it to a complete stranger and adopted that child out. What a tragedy. Native Hawaiian. And that's the kind of practice we need to stop. We need to stop that.
Thank you. Representative Belatti, following up with you really quick.
So I think you're right, and Mr. Choi is right. Native Hawaiians are disproportionately represented in our incarcerated population, and I think it's really important that's why we have to...
I want to be clear, though, really quickly, because I don't want this to shift to incarceration. This should be focused around Native Hawaiian economic development rather than incarceration, but go ahead.
Sure, and so let me maybe telescope it out. I think in all of the kind of social services and programs we offer, supports we offer, there's always, it's always important to be investing in culturally relevant, culturally based kind of solutions, so that there's an attention to that. Now, that's not always going to work for all of our population, but we have to be very conscious that we're supporting those kinds of community-based solutions. And I think, I know you don't want to make this about incarceration, but I think about like some of the best programs are those that are culturally grounded.
Yes.
And so that's how you bridge, right? You look at people who we need to help, and how do we get them to be participants in society? How do we get them to come back to contribute to the community? We need to have solutions and support nonprofit organizations that are doing that kind of community-based work.
Thank you. We're going to have a question around incarceration. That's why I want you guys to save your best stuff for later on, because I feel like you both, especially as attorney, have some doozies for us. So we definitely want to hear from you guys. Is there anything you would like to add around that discussion of Native Hawaiian advancement? Is there a cost benefit for it being exclusively Native Hawaiian, or should we always focus all people equally in that?
Well, I guess let's start off with the funding. There's a lot of funding that goes to Native Hawaiians, and besides housing, I believe they should start getting more within their community on beautification. With that relation, reevaluation of the Child Enforcement Agency calculator I believe is deeply affecting Native Hawaiians by causing financial stress, in turn either one, substance abuse, or patterns of altercation, especially with home bodies that are living together, dwelling together. As for consequences, I know there's a big shift towards mandatory sentencing, harsher punishment, but when you look at a local person and their nature, when you're around the same person every day, when we're on an island, it was more like that on outer islands and more like that in the past. We need to figure out that magic where when you're around someone all the time, you can still work with each other.
Yes.
Can I add something to this before we talk?
30 seconds, go ahead.
Okay, so as we look at organizations that are working specifically with Native Hawaiian communities, I think we also have to encourage that good work of groups like the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. When the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is executing on its duties and making sure and putting out grant programs and workforce development efforts, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs just recently hosted a student legislature at the Capitol. I think we need to hold those agencies and organizations accountable, and they in fact do deliver for us. So I think exactly, again, of the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, during the pandemic, they actually helped us in the delivery and the execution of things like the renter assistance program. And so you have Native Hawaiian organizations that are contributing to the economic well-being of the entire state. And that's what we do in Hawaii. We all work together. And so those are the kinds of partnerships I think we need to continue.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to add any 30-second reply in before we go on to the next question? All right, we'll go on to our next question. All right, you guys made it through the economy round. Now we're going to move in to our round 2 questioning. And this is going to get into some politics and public safety, all right? So we're going to really shift this conversation. Really, this is around, again, our policies that we've seen over the past year, as well as public safety out there that people care about. Let's first talk about the public employee retirement system, because this became a topic of conversation during the last legislative session. The governor publicly criticized, the legislature for not passing a retirement measure that his administration supported, following concerns that the proposal would primarily benefit a small number of individuals while potentially creating a broader implication for the state's retirement system. My question to the candidates today, especially since this was something championed by the governor, if a similar measure is introduced in future legislative sessions, would you support it? Please explain your position as to why and how you would balance the retirement system and the retention of public officials with our long-term sustainability of our employment. I'll start with you, Representative.
So we have constitutional obligations for retirement benefits, and I think, one, we need to make sure that we observe those. We also have to, and support those, and that's about investment, and that's what we obligate ourselves to. We have collective bargaining rules that govern these matters. The particular bill that you're referencing, I believe that would have helped just one or two persons. So we shouldn't be legislating ever just to address one or two individual persons. And so I would have problems with that. And I'm very glad that bill did not move forward. I think as I've seen legislation come through to address the problems that we have in public employment, the large vacancies, I think we need to have broader conversations about our human resources department, how we're hiring folks. And so that will also drive, so that drives the employment piece that you're asking about. Now with respect to investing in our, the public employees benefit system, again, that we're constitutionally obligated to do that once we've collectively bargained those benefits. And so we need to fund those parts of the budget moving forward. We have to be fiscally responsible. One of the things that I would say that I'm a little bit concerned about, and I have to check if the governor vetoed this, when we have excess funds over budget cycles, we're required by Constitution to do certain things with those excess funds, either return it to the taxpayer, put it into the rainy day fund, or put it into to fund down the unfunded liabilities, essentially. I think the governor may have vetoed that bill, and that concerns me because when you talk about the budget, globally, and you talk about budget year after year and our carryovers, right? I don't want to be in a situation where someday we're going to be saying, oh no, we have this huge unfunded liability and how are we going to fund it?
Correct.
So we need to be looking at our fiscal policies now, and when we enjoy surplus excess revenues, we need to follow our state constitution.
Thank you. Mr. Kudara.
Just to clarify the question, we're looking at our Kapuna and the retirement of many, right?
Yes, we're looking at the state retirement system. Would you support a bill, in theory, that would only affect 7 people but it may potentially have adverse effects on the state population?
Well, depending on what type of effects, because just because there's an effect, it doesn't have to be negative. When you constitute the Kapuna, and if you look at what they're probably relying on with inflation, Social Security is very low. If there's ways that bills that pass that help add to that. As for medications, on top of that, medications are ridiculous compared to other countries, and the same medications that are being sold here are a fraction of the price sold other places. So yes, I do support, but would benefit the 7. And if it affected the mass, then what effects are we talking about?
Thank you. Mr. Choi.
What she said.
All right, now in your words this time.
Well, you brought up something important, which is retention of government employees.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And, any bill that addresses only a small number of people, it looks like some sort of favor, or it's disproportionate. And, you'd have to look at the specific language, of course. But I want to talk about retention of and filling government positions. I worked on a case where there was 3 fatalities on the Likelike Highway on-ramp to the H3. And our investigation resulted in, other than the obvious, the lack of signage, the overgrowth of the hairpin curve. We got signs put in place, but the bottom of our investigation revealed that a clerk-level position had been chronically vacant in the Department of Transportation. And what that clerk did was put data of injuries on Hawaii roadways into a major database where they could pinpoint dangerous areas. And they were so chronically, like 3 years, that position had been filled for only like 6 months. So 2.5 years it was empty. And that led directly to those fatalities because there wasn't a system in place to catch those injuries happening on the exact same roadway. And retention is very important, and we need to be able to provide competitive salaries to compete with the private sector, because we as the government and we the people should have the brightest minds working for us to get us to where we need to go in the next generation. And I keep talking about generation because I believe in one generation we can make a huge difference in Hawaii.
Thank you. And I guess that actually leads me to a follow-up that I'll just open up to everybody and whoever just jump in. First, we do know that there is a high number of vacancies for state positions. is there anything that anybody here can commit to trying to fill those positions? How can we fill them? It's not news to me. I mean, when I came 14 years ago in grad school, this was the story. So if you are the next lieutenant governor, what can we expect so that these positions are filled? And so people aren't constantly also having to leave Hawaii to go find jobs.
So on the campaign trail, I talked with so many people who are frustrated with the hiring system and the hiring process. And that there are in fact some people who are in these 89-day positions in hiring, and then they're doing the job, but then for some reason they're not, through our hiring processes, they're not being able to be hired into the position that they're already working in. Someone really needs to look at what is happening in our DHERD, our Human Resources Department, and really make sure the legislature has struggled.
When you say look at, is that auditing? Is that investigating?
Pushing them to move faster, to do job descriptions faster. We constantly see departments coming forward and saying, we need help to moving through this process. So there is some kind of road blockage there that we need to help move through. Also, I do think that what Mr. Choi says is that we need to be looking at we constantly talk about repricing. Well, that's a collective bargaining issue. That's about making sure that we have salaries that are competitive. And so we need to revisit that, because as the jobs and the technologies out there changing, the clerical person who's there may be doing more work, different skills. We need to make sure that one, they have the technology that they can do their jobs, but then we're also paying them what they're seeing and getting paid in the private sector.
Mr. Quadra, any thoughts?
I believe the two crucial factors we look at is, one, cybersecurity. That affects our kapuna. Everyday transactions, you'll be surprised on an entity taking a penny here and there. After that, I notice a lot of people in Hawaii are, one, not following their job descriptions, and two, most importantly, they're doing jobs that they're not certified or qualified to do. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, is when someone steps out and they start doing things in that nature.
Thank you. And Mr. Choi, you kind of hit on it in your answer, but when we do talk about these vacancies there, how do we stop, I guess if I can dress the question up differently for you, this kind of already answer, how do we stop a brain drain in this state? Because these jobs that you guys are describing, they're not low-level jobs. These are jobs that are requiring, computer systems, data inputs, some even algorithms, trends. How do we stop that brain drain of our middle class workforce?
Going back to what Della said, the hiring process is painfully slow. When I was hired, it took, I had private sector applications, and I had interned in law school with the Attorney General's office. And so when I applied, I came back and I applied for a position with the Attorney General. It took months and months and months, and I was immediately hired in the private sector. And but of course, my heart lied with the people I used to work with in my internship, and I switched over. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the months and months it takes, the uncertainty, but I think we can make these jobs more attractive by using technology. I remember the thing I was most shocked about was how far behind we were in technology in my state job. I remembered working in the private sector, and we had email like 10 years ago. And then like a few months into my job at the AG's office, I want to date this in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Everybody was so excited that we had gotten email. But in the private sector, they'd already been using it for a decade. And I'm talking about inter-office email, not like Hotmail or Gmail. But we need to revamp the technology. And with technology, we'd have to really rely on the supervisors and the the troops on the ground, as far as each department, government employees, to know which positions can be more efficient with the use of AI technology, for example. And by doing that, if we're able to cut some positions and increase the wages for others, that would be a good balance of the use of technology and bringing our state workforce technology to the level where it needs to be.
Thank you. I do want to remind you guys of the time constraints, so if you see me hurrying you along, there is no disrespect intended. Just trying to make sure we get to everything that we have on tonight's agenda. Moving on to the second part of our question for this round, really around corrections and policy correction policy, policing, rehabilitation. Hawaii is pursuing a public-private partnership to construct a new correctional facility with projected costs approaching $1 billion. Do you support the use of private-public partnerships for this project? Why or why not? And beyond the construction of a new facility itself, what reforms of rehabilitation would you champion to reduce recidivism, and improve public safety and emphasize rehabilitation?
May I go for a minute?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So to address the question before and going into this question now, part A and B, when we look at technology, let's look at the universal code and language you use. I believe that the silent algorithms used affects us spiritually, and like the moon affects our behavior and allows us to do certain things. I believe more technology use and more AI use adds to the system we're involved in. And when we think about that, there's things in Congress going on right now, for instance, with Israel, and how AI is doing great things.
Really quick, just for the sake of the question, can you move into the part really about the public-private partnership
Yeah.
for a potential $1 billion deal?
So, like I said, AI is doing a bunch of great things. And now the great things they're doing is filling out contracts on a dime. So things are moving much faster than they normally would. Anytime the private sector and the public sector get together in coalition, I believe is great. If we're to talk about, are we into reform yet? Or, as for building wise, yes, I'm in favor for anything as long as it modifies the establishment and the surrounding, because
Does well. You finish that thought. Go.
oh, because you can have state-of-the-art facility, but if all the integers around it can't work with it together and they're not equipped, that's when the public and private need to get together to make sure the environment fits the product that's in place.
Sorry, Choi?
Well, you're talking about building more prisons. I am against that. Our facilities are outdated, and I don't know how much remodeling they need to have done and renovation, but building a whole brand new prison, I think we need to go in the opposite direction, where we stop incarcerating people, especially Native Hawaiians and the disenfranchised. Micronesians are also disproportionately jailed. And so we have, in America, this beautiful policy of imprisoning the poorest and the least represented. And we as Hawaii, we should set an example, have a model system where we decriminalize nonviolent, or not decriminalize, but de-incarcerate nonviolent offenders. And it goes to drugs, really, and alcohol abuse. And because so many people are high on drugs or drunk when they commit crimes. And, it's so impressive that we can keep rabies out of our state, which is an invisible, undetectable virus infection. And yet we can't keep tons and tons of drugs out. I think it's where our priorities lay. And there is a whole industry, it's called the prison industry, that profits off criminalizing drug addiction. And, you know, I would be very wary about any prisons being built, but a concept of private and government, so long as it's done with open and competitive bidding and everything on the table, so we hire just the best private sector people, not the ones who contributed.
Correct.
And yeah, I'll talk more about that in a second.
Okay.
There's a lot in your question, Cameron, and I think let me tackle the public-private partnership first. The prison and the new prison that the state is looking at building is going to be built through a public-private partnership, a design, build, maintain kind of model. And so I think we have had experience with building large projects through this kind of public-private partnership model. I think it's a way that we need to move forward on. The state hospital, the new state hospital was kind of built up on that. But we need to make sure that when that's happening, that the government agencies responsible for the contracting and the oversight are really holding the builders accountable. So what we saw happen with the state hospital is that we did see the state hospital have parts of it delayed in the opening and use of it. And so we can't afford to have that kind of thing happen with any new prisons that are built. Now, on the separate question of prisons, the state of the condition of prisons, and the need for a new prison, as public safety chair, I visited our prisons systems. We need to build a new prison. The current one that we have in OCCC, we can do, I agree with some of the advocates that we can do some things to make sure that it's still usable. And we can do that with all of our facilities. We have to do a better job of just maintaining and repair and maintenance of all of our facilities. We have an obligation to the people we incarcerate, that they have living conditions that are humane. So we have to do that. But part of that is also that we do need to have a new prison. That's in part, I think, if we also want to bring people back from the private prisons in Arizona, we need facilities here as well. And so I think when we look at the prison system as a whole, and I'm looking forward to the legislature really tackling this issue, because even though, you know, there are advocates out there saying we're just investing in a huge new super prison, right? There's an opportunity in the process now to make sure that what is going to be designed has the mental health treatment that we need, so that it's not just like this super facility that people are afraid of, that the advocates, many of the public advocates are afraid of. We need new infrastructure in the state. The prison that they're talking about in the Halawa area is part of the long-term planning for the prison system. So I don't think it's realistic to just out of hand say we can't build it, we should stop it. We need to do something, because the current conditions of the prisons that we have now are not, prisons, jails are not necessarily humane when you go and visit them. And so we do need to have more space. Again, designing it to be more mental health treatment rehabilitation. It is now the Department of DCCR.
I think that's like where my follow-up question to the group is really at, is I heard everybody pretty eloquently break down, you know, as far as public-private partnership, building a new correctional facility, but what can we do? That's, I think, the second part of the question that I would love to hear from you guys is, what can we do to stop repeat offenders or low-level offenses being held in holding because they're poor and can't afford to get out? Or what are we doing to make sure that we are not an imprisonment society, but rather a rehabilitation society?
Sure, I'd love to answer that
Go
question.
ahead.
So currently on the main line,
Like that.
there is a private, public prison that is focused solely on teaching the prisoners on building homes. So they manufacture homes while they're in prison, and they're paid a wage while they're in prison. And when they get out, they have a skill, a very valuable skill. Now, if we were to do something like that, private, public, built in Hawaii, so we could teach and it would be a replacement for OCCC, not additional
Correct.
cells, you know, a replacement for Halawa, I've been there to visit both Halava and OCCC and other facilities, and they are very old. And I think of all of them, OCCC will probably need to be replaced at some point. But we could address the housing problem and the prison problem in one sweep. And currently the Seventh-day Adventists are doing this on the mainland. It's a wonderful program. And they let the prisoners know, you can either go to the regular prison or you can go to this private sector prison. And that's, this is what they're going to do, but they're super strict. If you screw up, you're out. But this could set your whole future. You'll learn a trade, but they are super strict, and it's not business as usual as far as the prison is concerned. And it's a program that I would get behind for private, public, and rebuilding more prisons in Hawaii.
Okay, we'll get Mr. Khawaja and then Ms. Bellotti.
I'll be brief. Prison reform I'm in favor of. Instead of mandatory lockup, to keep one incarceration from being locked up at cell block. The release should be fine without risk of flight risk or whatever risk that would prevent them from going in. I think that will tackle a lot of stuff, because just if you look at the whole system now, there's so many people and it's so overpopulated that the right of a speedy trial is kind of modified from when you look at the frames of our Constitution and the way it is now. There wasn't that much people. So, prison reform with Senate bills that are acted but didn't pass the final phases yet, I believe are in a good direction we're going.
Thank you. Ms. Bellotti.
I love John's idea, and I think this is one of the great things about being lieutenant governor is that you can go out and look for some good ideas and bring them back to Hawaii. What I would say is that I know that the corrections department does try to connect current incarcerated folks to those kinds of programs, employment programs. So I would love to see that escalate actually through the correction industries, and so that's a great idea. I would also like to say that we need to push on the governor's mental health, criminal justice initiatives. And as lieutenant governor, that's an area that I would love to work with the governor on. This is the group that's looking at that cycle where we have people who are low-level offenders. They get taken in, and they might have mental health issues. We see them going to the state hospital. They cycle in and out. They go back to the street, and they're in this constant revolving cycle. I believe we've written a lot of laws to empower police departments and prosecutors and the judiciaries and nonprofit agencies to help that kind of population. We need to really help the governor make sure that the laws we've implemented or are enacted, he can implement. There's an exciting project going on in Maui right now, being led by the county prosecutor there. They're going to have a summit they're convening at the end of July. This is based on a model of mental health substance abuse treatment in Florida under the leadership of Judge Leifman. They've been working on this project for a year or so. That's the kind of partnership and collaboration we need to help make sure happens. And it's a collaboration with the county prosecutors, with the judiciary, with probation, with the nonprofit agencies that can help, with the supportive housing agencies, all of these groups that are there to help people, not go back into the system.
Right.
And so we really need to utilize those kinds of partnerships.
Thank you. For the sake of time, we got to keep going. But
Okay,
thank you.
sorry. I'm really passionate about this one, though. 'Cause this is something that we need to work on.
Well, I've got a public safety question for you guys now, and then we'll move on to public safety into good government. But before we leave public safety, although crime rates in Hawaii they've declined in several categories in recent years, many residents continue to express concerns about public safety, however. Why do you believe there is a disconnect between crime statistics and public perception? As Lieutenant Governor, What steps would you take to strengthen confidence while ensuring law enforcement officers receive training, resources, and necessary supports to effectively serve our community? And we will start with you, Mr. Choi.
Well, I think the drug problem is what people deal with most when they think of personal security, because the homeless and the people who are in our day-to-day lives that bring us that insecurity often have a lot of mental health or drug-related issues. And so statistically, you're absolutely right. You know, we have some of the lowest physical body crime in the United States. But property theft, personal property, is one of the highest. So our stuff gets stolen, but you know, it's really difficult to get randomly murdered or beaten up in Hawaii. I feel safe in Hawaii, but not when I'm in a neighborhood where I know there's a lot of homeless. And it's not so much that, and I've dealt with a lot of homeless and families that are homeless, and it's not that they are actually dangerous or will, you know, but you have those incidents where it's always on the news and their erratic behavior brings great concern for your personal safety. But there is a disconnect between the statistics and how people feel safe. And one of the public safety issues is, I think, traffic, which I'll talk about, you know, more later. But you know, we're fortunate to live in a state where the most dangerous thing you could do is walk across the street or drive in a car. In some states, it's merely just being a victim of physical, violent crime. And I think we're blessed to be in Hawaii that we don't have those concerns. But at the same time, we do need to address that safety issue.
Rep. Bellotti, and then...
Can you rephrase the question again?
Yeah, no, you're fine. Basically, why do you believe there is a disconnect between crime statistics and public perception? And what would you do to strengthen community confidence as Lieutenant Governor while working to make sure that the police force is supported and trained properly?
Okay. Again, complex question, Cameron.
You know, we're never going to give you anything easy over here now.
Okay. I think the crime stats being down and the public perception that people feel unsafe, I think because of the visibility, as John said, of some in my community, right? You know, when before a sweep happens, you see a lot of people who are suffering from substance abuse or mental health issues, and it's not safe. People don't feel safe around that. They don't feel safe going into parks, and so that visibility makes people feel unsafe. And so I think we really need to work to make sure, again, this mental health, the cycling of folks from the street to the state hospital and back, we need to really address that. Because when you tackle that, people are feeling then that the laws are enforced. I've had so many small business owners along King Street who repeatedly report things that are happening, and they have police officers who come to them and say, we can't do anything. Well, but then they've witnessed property damage, to Mr. Choi's point of view. And so that's why I think we need to enforce the laws we have, and then for these folks who are committing low-level crimes, they're crimes against property, they're crimes against some businesses, they're crimes against people feel unsafe. If we address them and get folks the real help that they need, that's how we make people feel more safe. Now, the issue about restoring community confidence and ensuring that law enforcement...
You kind of spoke to that by saying, by taking care of our substance abuse issue.
But the law enforcement piece, you
Yes.
talked about training. That's another piece. That's talking about like law enforcement training policies, the law enforcement standards boards. I think we need to make sure that our law enforcement standards and policies are consistent with best practices.
Thank you.
And it's a really important thing to be doing.
Best practices. Squadron.
The main focus the public needs to do is get away out on removing the problem out of sight and out of mind. The problem is still there, and a lot of people in our neighborhoods, their number one go-to is call the police, send them to jail for whatever reason. I hear what you say about private owners making complaints, and they feel like the laws are working. But we need to look at the nature of complaints, especially since with increased power to police, increased power to prosecutors, that's all done for a reason. And when we look at the nature of the crime and the ones who are complaining, if the shift is truthful, nowadays I doubt it's more deceitful. But the biggest thing is hospitals are not prison and treatment is not prison. So yes, they have access to it, but if you're ever incarcerated, the access is very limited, and the treatment you need, you won't have access to. You're only gonna be able to get what is allowed funded for safety. Police officers, they need more laws that will allow them to act more freely during their presence in uniform. Also, I know with training, yeah, they look like they have a lot of stuff, but when it comes down to it, they really need they need up-to-date cars. All like that's one thing, because then all the modifications are done to it, along with other material and instruments they use.
I guess
They-
yes, that's,
they need
that's
more.
the crux of the second part of the question that I want to bring it back to the group before we move on is we know that we have some of the best law enforcement officers in the nation. However, we also want our officers to be safe and prepared for every situation that they go into. In my conversations with officers, union, and leaders, it has always been a resource issue that we, the public, at times think that they have a lot of access to things. They actually don't. So in knowing that can really, that tone gets started and set at the executive branch level, I guess my question is, if you guys could speak to the police force, what would you tell them to say that you're going to be supported in your mission to protect and serve? And please, don't make this an ad for a union. A real conversation for these officers, for these families who have their loved ones go out there every day and put it and leave it all on the line. What resources, what would you like to see?
I would say triple the budget for all pilot programs, and increase the capacity for the pilot programs. For example, when they use any type of monetary means, maybe have a unit to do it lively instead of to be evaluated later. But constant Big Brother, I'm for that.
Yeah.
So I'm for Big Brother.
Can I speak to the standards that I was talking about before, the policy board, and also training? So
If you can do it in a minute.
I'll try. Okay.
There you go.
There is, we've worked on laws, and I've worked on these laws with Governor Green, his administration, and even when he was a senator. We know that police officers are going into situations when there's often mental health issues at play, and that the jump to the gun should not be the first thing. It needs to be really having them trained in de-escalation, understanding how to approach these mental health situations. And so we are seeing the work and the implementation happening now, especially in the city and county of Honolulu, with groups like HHRC, where they're going out and training officers about how to approach these situations better and how to de-escalate. And so it's exactly those kinds of training opportunities, that kind of resources that we need to invest in, so that the officers who are going out there are equipped to deal with the multiple challenges that they're now seeing, right? The other thing I would say is, like, we saw the same thing in the conversation around domestic violence, right? Sometimes you need social workers who are going out there, who are called, and that the police force can tap into. Those are the kinds of things, and some of those, we have good starts with some of those programs, and then they fall away. And so we need to again make sure that the police have the resources, the training, and if there needs to be additional folks who are trained with them, we provide that. this is going to help us. Again, the laws that we place, whether they get diverted, where some of these people might get diverted to prison, or they get diverted to the emergency room, or they get diverted to behavioral health centers, right?
Yes.
That's the kind of, our police officers need the training to be able to do those kinds of assessments, and then, or be connected to the people who are part of the system to say, okay, this person needs to go here.
To get them there.
To get them there, to get them
Thank
to the
you.
right place for actual treatment.
Thank you. Mr. Choi.
Yeah, I am, deeply concerned about the number of police responses for, the homeless. It's taking up too much resource. So you have this very small population consuming a vast resource that's meant for everyone else. And I would support the police. The Hawaii police officers, I think, are best in the whole country, if not in the entire world. There's no place where I would, if I felt any sort of I needed assistance, I would run to HPD, because I feel that those officers serve with aloha. Now, I couldn't say, I went to school, spent a lot of time on the mainland, and I couldn't say that about some of the places I lived, where the police were just feared and not trusted. But in Hawaii, I believe that they have a difficult job because of the high number of homelessness, where they're dealing with that instead of what they signed up for, to protect and to serve. And yes, the homeless are part of our community, and yes, they should be dealt with. But police response, the first response for homelessness, is a waste of resources. And government has to be efficient. It has to be able to be dynamic and change to the times. Correct. And we need to have a system where the police aren't the first line for the houseless community.
Right. And I think also, just like in the spirit of the question, was really more around what is uniquely our state faces with our police, right? There are certain things that happen on the continent that's for the continent to figure out. But are our police getting mass casualty training for the event of a natural disaster like we saw in the likes of Lahaina? Are our first responders ready for an extended super El Nino period that could see more Kona lows type things? Those are things that I don't think at times the general public is remembering, that we call on our police force in these cases too, and they need that support there. But getting to good government, you guys, because that's the bread and butter. We're winding down here. Listen. Let's get really into it. You guys are running for a position right now where the sitting incumbent simply is not in office. Currently, there is a caretaker lieutenant governor that nobody voted for. We have absolutely no charges brought against our current voted for lieutenant governor, and yet we are embattled in a scandal that seems to be about money and how it was reported. However, even me as a director of a state watchdog group, I'm not for sure what the exact issue with our lieutenant governor is. However, it has led to scandal surrounding the office itself. I guess my question for you guys, if elected lieutenant governor, what specific commitments and reforms would you make to demonstrate ethical leadership, strengthen accountability, and restore public trust in the government? And for this question, we'll start with Representative Bellotti.
First.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to go ahead?
Going back to the last one.
He went first 2 times, and before that it was you. She actually hasn't gone for 4 questions in a row.
It's okay. We can.
I'm okay with either one. I just wanted to make sure we cleared the record.
I'll differ.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. One, I disagree with a lot of things you say. As for safety concerns, especially the being homeless now is considered a safety concern. So when DHS gets involved, they will split a family up just for being homeless. Before that, it used to be a safety concern. A lot of people need to realize the homeless that you see on the street are really not the homeless population. That's just a small fraction of a fraction. A lot of the homeless are unseen. A lot of homeless are in encampments. The biggest concern with rules and procedure is the difference between civil law and criminal law. And where the public wants to ask for safety concerns regarding complaints, that starts more of a personal vendetta. If you follow the neighborhood boards, you know, the people get frustrated because they can't get what they want when it comes to a civil complaint. Now, moving into your question, will you please repeat it so I can update it?
If elected Lieutenant Governor, what specific commitments and reforms would you make to demonstrate ethical leadership and to strengthen accountability to restore trust in government?
Well, the first thing I would do is to look at the confidential family court cases and see how they are using their power by the 14th Amendment for jurisdiction. Their main concern is do what I say and it must be done. What is that word called? What is it? Compliance. Compliance is it's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. It doesn't matter what brought you there. It matters there's compliance to the safety concern. So when it comes to things and it comes to perversion in any way, that's what people need to look at, where it's right in front of you. But if you don't recognize the patterns, then you can be the subject of many debates where the lieutenant governor before was quoted to be useless. You know, the most powerful person is seen useless sometimes.
Thank you.
The current scandal with the lieutenant governor is grounded in campaign contributions that were received by Representatives Ty Cullen and Senator English, for which there was an actual, bribery charges. And so that's one reason why I'm not accepting private corporate PAC monies. I think that we have elected leadership candidates that are, quite frankly, addicted to corporate monies. We see it in the large amounts.
Addicted is a word, but go ahead.
Well, it is. I mean, and people will look at my past records and say, well, Representative Bellotti, you've accepted corporate PAC money in the past. And I would say yes. And I think one of the things that, I've always been committed to things like clean elections. I've always been committed to open government. I started off my political career, my public service career as a campaign spending commissioner. But once elected, right, I have to operate within the system and the rules that we have. And so over my 20 years, I will say that I've abided by the rules and I've abided by all the limitations and the reporting. And so that's part of the process. But now having seen the kind of corrupting influence, and when you see how few people actually dominate the process, when you see super PACs that can get funded up to $10 million and run candidates who might just walk in and be funded by independent expenditures, there's something wrong with their system. And so for me, over the last 4 years, I've really evolved. And like this year, in this race, in my congressional race before this, I had committed to not accepting corporate PAC money. And that's really important. So I think ethical leadership begins with individual decisions. It's another reason why I returned monies that I had received from Milton Choi. Never knew the man, but I returned those monies and escheated it to the Campaign Spending Commission. But beyond just what individual acts, we actually have to do systemic reform. We have to close down the contractor loophole that currently exists that allows a small number of people to donate millions of dollars to key legislators. That system has to stop. We need to close down the contractor loophole.
I'm sorry, we got to move on.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Choi.
We'll keep coming back to it.
Well, I'm not a career politician, and I think that I haven't been in the system. I'm able to look at the system from the outside. We have a lot of great people working in the system, but they're stuck in a broken system where money dominates and rules. It is so broken. And the repair, what is the repair? We got to get the money out. Yeah, is that just lip service? Get the money out, get the money out. How are we going to do that? We got to move towards clean elections And clean elections has to involve publicly funded elections, where once a candidate qualifies, let's say the three of us are running for a position, we all get the required signatures. Maybe it's 200, not just 50 or 25. But it's, once you get that, everybody gets the same amount of money. The public can see how that money's spent, who's creative, efficient with that money. Because right now the system is raise as much as you can, spend as much as you can, and then they're rewarded with winning, and they're gonna keep spending the taxpayers' money. That system's broken. There was a bill in this past legislature that said contractors who currently have contracts cannot donate to any politicians. On the surface, it looks good. We pass a lot of those laws that on the surface they look good. But that's an empty, toothless bill. Because if they already got the contract, that means they were contributing for 5 years before that. So the law should say any contractor who's given in the past 5 years, you're disqualified. And we got to get that money out, and we got to be serious about it. As Lieutenant Governor, I will enforce the law of Hawaii and put into place new laws to enforce keeping money out. We passed a bill that the nation is now following, and that is to keep corporate money out of politics by changing the definition of politics. And I am so proud of Hawaii for doing that. And other states are copying, but immediately when that law passed and when Governor Green signed it, there was a lawsuit to try to overturn that law. We can't stop fighting, we gotta keep fighting.
Thank you.
Can I rebut just a
I'll give everybody 30 seconds.
I helped to pass that law, Act 11, and one of the reasons why I pivoted to the race of lieutenant governor is because I want to make sure that we defend that law. It's not quite so simple. Not all the states have picked it up yet. We're going to have to do a lot of work to maintain it. Also, I have been a long supporter of clean elections. I know how difficult it is. It's easy to say I support it, I'm going to pass it, but as lieutenant governor, you don't pass bills. It's the legislature that does. And I have for 20 years been working. I've been on record, introduced bills for comprehensive clean elections, comprehensively publicly funded elections. And it is a hard bill to pass. So I want to be a pragmatist about how we get money out of politics. It's going to be a step-by-step process. We have to close down the contractor loopholes. There's laws that have been gone, not laws, bills that have been proposed that have gone all the way up to conference committee. This year, the House, after speaking with Chair Tarnas, the roadblock, the group that didn't want to come to the table was the Senate. So we have to encourage our lawmakers to be braver and take on these issues and not be addicted to this money. Because really for many of lawmakers, it may be in their self-interest not to enact these laws, but we have to show them we have to work with the public to demand that these laws be passed. As Lieutenant Governor, I want to be an ally to make sure the contractor loopholes bills gets closing down contractor loopholes gets passed and is a priority.
Thank you. Mr. Quadri, would you like to respond?
Yes. Okay. So, first we must remember our culture. Ho'okupu, receiving a present doesn't automatically mean corruption. And we need to look at corruption and what really is corruption, especially in our non-violent society. Corruption is birthed when commission regulates control for action. I've seen the cleanest hands leave the dirtiest trace. And forgive me for saying this, or don't, but with your history and the campaign spending, one, it needs to be more realistic. It's a pain in the ass to retrieve funds unless you're connected with it. And for instance, when I spoke to people there, and terminology like yes, but a known candidate, and yes, a not known candidate. This relationship in itself turns ugly, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you guys. Sadly, I've got so many more questions for you, but you guys got to get home to your family. So what I'd like to do is give you guys time for a closing, and first offer my apologies for not giving you guys a proper opening, but please take a minute and a half to close. Look into the camera and tell your voters what you would like to know. We'll start with you, Mr. Quadra.
I'd like to get to know you. If you see me around, please say hi. And contract is easy.
Thank you. Representative Bellotti.
Thank you. Life in Hawaii is unsustainable and unaffordable. I get it. My family and I have been renters for over 17 years. My husband and I were renters for 17 years before we were able to save enough to buy our own apartment. We send our children to public school. My husband and I share one car. He also drives a moped so we can save on gas costs. I feel lucky that we could pay down a mortgage, but if we worry, then I know that others are making hard choices every day to survive. So one of the things we didn't get to talk about was how are we going to tackle the high cost of housing, education, healthcare, energy, and food costs. And that's going to be one of my priorities as Lieutenant Governor. I also want to do and ensure that we restore public trust in government. And what that means is getting money out of politics. It means making sure that government is honest, government works for people, and not special interests. I will fight to close down the contractor loophole where development interests are dominating our politics with their money. Lastly, the third priority that I have as Lieutenant Governor is to protect and defend what makes Hawaii special. What does this mean? It means protecting Native Hawaiian programs, fighting against federal overreach when they come after our immigrant communities. This means finding money to fill in the gaps for Medicaid and our social safety net programs. This means protecting our natural resources. So we didn't ever get to that question about tax revenues and budget priorities, but I really want to make sure that we are doing all of that right. Hawaii deserves better. It deserves a government that is looking out for our residents. And so I urge you to vote for me for Lieutenant Governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Choi, close us out.
Thank you. We need to get money out of politics. Nothing will get fixed until we do. We must end corporate campaign donations. Close loopholes that let government contractors give money to the very politicians that award the contracts. We must move Hawaii towards publicly funded elections. No other government employee is allowed to accept money. Why should politicians be able to? When we reduce the influence of money in our politics, issues like the cost of living, housing, where we spend a disproportionate amount of our income in Hawaii on housing, education, and things that matter will finally receive the attention that they deserve. Publicly funded elections are not just one issue amongst many. It is the fundamental issue that will change everything. As a civil trial lawyer, I built my career on fighting corporations in the courtroom. My campaign is built on family, hard work, never give up, and stay humble. I've lived on Oahu for 28 years. My wife and I, we raised 2 children who were born and raised in Kapahulu. I coached youth soccer, and as a family, we love dogs and the beach. Join me, John Choi, for the fight for Hawaii. Thank you.
And with that, we want to thank you guys so much for tuning in and joining us at Common Cause for this debate. Please tune in next week as we host CD1 Democratic Primary Debate. Again, my name is Cameron Hurt. Thank you guys for joining us tonight.